What's up guys, Deroir here with the fourth part of my comprehensive review of Path of Fire. This video will be twofold, in that firstly I want to talk about the achievements that came with Path of Fire, which will lead me directly into the second topic, which is rewards, and tangentially I will end up discussing the replayability incentives with Path of Fire, also touching on the bounty system. So yeah, a bit of an all-around video about the rewards and reward structures in Path of Fire. Now, I kind of want to preface this section of my review by stating that I am a bit of a completionist, which largely is tied to the sense of account-wide progression that is tied to stuff like the achievement milestone chests. I love seeing the values of my account-wide magic find or XP gain go up incrementally. Same goes for the armor and weapon sets, but most importantly for me is that I like having an incentive to go and play all aspects of the game. Now obviously that requires proper incentives. For Path of Fire, the latter point on my previous list was very much fulfilled with the Path of Fire achievements, as the majority of the achievements are aimed at getting players to experience the hidden nooks and crannies of the maps and experience all the different events, event chains, and listen to the stories of the NPCs. That at least goes for most of the map achievements. Personally, I don't think I would have experienced as much as I have of the open world story and seen as many of the hidden areas as I have if I hadn't gone for all the achievements. Following the cues and clues from the achievements and the collections really helped me get deeply embedded into Alona. As for the story achievements, well, there was nothing really innovative about those. They mostly rewarded you for just playing through the story, sometimes in specific ways and sometimes by asking you to also uncover clues about your enemies. Standard stuff, nothing wrong about that. Oh, and we even had additional Slayer achievements added to the game, one of them even being added as a core achievement, which was the Crystal Cracker achievement to slay Kralkatorix branded minions. The other ones were for killing Forged, Awakened, Desert Predators, and Jinn. The Jinn achievement being the first and only one to only require 100 kills, since Jinn are a bit more troublesome to fight than your average enemy. Now we're really just missing Slayer achievements for Mordrim and Saurians, then we're all caught up. We also had the addition of specialization achievements and collections, again following the structure of Heart of Thorns. The collections were basically just copied versions of the Heart of Thorns collections, just with new names and locations. Good standard stuff and fun to chase after. However, the good quality and engagement of some of these achievements is somewhat dwarfed by the fact that Path of Fire only came with a total of about 1200 achievement points, or an average of about 3.5 achievement points per newly added Path of Fire achievement. Not everyone obviously cares about the issue of minuscule achievement points getting added to the game for so long, but I kinda do. Now, I understand that this is possibly due to ArenaNet not wanting to bloat the achievement numbers too massively, but still, currently we're still looking at several more years worth of achievements coming in at this rate before anyone in the game will be able to acquire any of the exclusive back pieces obtained through the achievement chests. Especially if we are to consider Path of Fire a standard benchmark going forth. That said though, I have to commend the fact that ArenaNet didn't put any absolutely insanely grindy achievements into the game like they did with Heart of Thorns. Comparatively, for me, getting all Path of Fire achievements took about 10 days versus me getting all Heart of Thorns achievements, which took approximately 5 months. The leap is immense. It got to the point where towards the end of my achievement grind through Path of Fire, I suddenly got it stuck in my head to name the expansions Heart of Grind and Path of Casual. Now, Path of Fire being more casually oriented is not necessarily an inherently bad thing, in my opinion. It shines through the gameplay that the devs no longer intended for us to necessarily grind everything, but rather liberate players to more easily pick and choose what they wanted to be rewarded for, instead of forcing players into cubbyholes of grind. That said though, the main reason why I feel comfortable saying that this is a good thing, or not a bad thing at least, is probably heavily influenced by the fact that I know that we will be seeing the beginning of Living World Season 4 in just a matter of days. I'll be quite honest with you, there is not much to keep players occupied for months and months on end just with the content we were provided with in the expansion, but this topic I'll touch more on in a bit. To return to the topic of decreased grindy achievements though, I have to say that they may have overdone it just slightly, and this is where we move into the topic of rewards. See, with Path of Fire we were given the opportunity to go out into the desert to acquire and earn 5 new sets of armor for every armor weight. That's 15 full sets of armor plus the elite specialization armor pieces, which adds up to a total of 99 new armor pieces added into the game, not counting the 4 new back pieces too. Same goes for the 6 new weapon sets, plus the 9 elite specialization weapons. Initially, apart from the specialization weapons and armors, none of these armor or weapon sets were tied to collections, which otherwise has been a very regular and stable thing for ArenaNet to add. Now, that has since been rectified, but still. Weapon and armor collections have 2 functionalities in this game. The first being that of giving players an overall goal to work towards, obviously, to collect all the different armor weights. But secondly, they also serve as an overview of the armor pieces that you've collected so far. I actually ended up having to make a spreadsheet just to keep track of the different armor pieces I had acquired so that I wouldn't accidentally pick one I already had. This was further complicated by the armor and weapon sets not appearing in the wardrobe, which left a lot of players in a weird situation of not knowing if or how many armor pieces they could work towards. These collections, however, were added at a later date, which added that extra layer of reward and incentive for players to work towards these armors. One of my main gripes, however, with the whole armor and weapon collection part of Path of Fire was that most of the armor and weapon sets you could just simply buy for no money. It's only really the funerary armor and weapon sets that have any kind of challenge attached to the acquisition of them. That minor complaint aside though, I have to give credit where credit is due, and the fact that we got so many different armor and weapon skins baffles me to this day. It is one of the single biggest influxes of armor pieces we've seen for years, and I for one really commend ArenaNet for pulling this one off. Thank you. Thank you for adding so much more diversity to our wardrobe selection through actual in-game acquisition. This, in my opinion, truly is one of the greatest additions to the game that Path of Fire actually brought with it. As for the armor sets themselves, we've got the Elonian sets, which is acquired through just playing through all the story steps. We've got the Spear Marshal sets, which is an upgraded, more detailed version of the Elonian set. We've got the Bounty Hunter armor sets, acquired mainly through the wandering vendor, the Priory historian Eliza. Then we've got the Warbeast armor sets, which is crafted by acquiring the Warbeast recipes from killing forged enemies. And lastly, we've got the Funerary armor set, which initially is unlocked through 6 different collections, some of which are really rather hard to complete. This unlocks a vendor at the Tomb of Primeval Kings, which sells you both the armor and weapons for elegy mosaics, acquired through defeating bounty legendary bosses. As for the weapon sets, we've got the Elonian weapon set acquired throughout the entire desert from anything that potentially has rare drops. We then have the Sunspear weapon set, which basically is the exotic upgrade of the Elonian weapons. These are crafted, but first you have to buy the recipes for them off of a heart vendor. The same format goes for the Awakened weapon set, which is a rare drop by killing awakened enemies, and then the exotic version, the Mordant weapon set, is also crafted with the recipes acquired through heart vendors. Admittedly, I find the Mordant weapon set to be so awesome. I don't know why, but I find that the gold decorated bones are just really well combined components. Next up, we have the Forged weapon set, which isn't exactly a full weapon set, but just 5 different ones. These are acquired as rare drops from killing forged enemies. Lastly, we have the Funerary set. These are bought with large quantities of elegy mosaics and thus require quite a bit of bounty hunting. All in all, I've completely fallen head over heels over some of these and have already incorporated several pieces into the appearances of some of my characters, with more to come as I continue down the list of making new armor sets to fit the new elite specializations. But despite all of these awesome armors and weapon sets being added, and even a whole house full of mini pets which I haven't even talked about, Path of Fire still, in my opinion, lack a very specific kind of reward, a long-term reward. Something prestigious that players will claw their way to acquire. Now, I know that a single immensely popular reward was added, the Festive Confetti Infusion, which is acquired through the meta event chain in the Crystal Oasis. However, this reward does not really qualify for the long-term kind of reward that I'm asking for. The infusion simply has a super low drop rate and is thus highly valued on the trading post. No, the specific kind of reward that I truly feel Path of Fire was lacking was any kind of legendary trinket, perhaps. ArenaNet unfortunately have a history with the last expansion of overextending their vision with legendary weapons and thus under-delivering on their promises for legendary armor and weapons for Heart of Thorns. And so I can understand why they perhaps didn't feel like advertising a new legendary coming into the game just yet, but still, it could have easily have been a hidden reward for players to discover, much like the Griffin was. Speaking of the Griffin, obviously it could be argued that the addition of the Griffin through the collection method felt much like a legendary journey, and I'd be inclined to partially agree. However, the Griffin was set to an acquisition level equal to the effort of an average player base, and at least to me, didn't feel like it was intended for players to overextend themselves to get it. Now, I'm not saying that a high price is equal to a good reward. Many more factors go into the crafting of a legendary, especially those that come with expansions, as they require map completions and the new currencies and stuff like that. And so I do feel like Path of Fire was missing one special component, and specifically I remember feeling genuinely surprised that there wasn't a legendary amulet added with the game. It felt to me like an amulet was the obvious choice, since every single meta achievement for the different story steps awards you with a different amulet with the 3 new stat types in the game. It felt to me like those were supposed to be part of a precursor collection, and perhaps they might even become just that in the near future of the living world, but there was no such thing at the launch of the expansion, which I personally think is a huge shortcoming for Path of Fire. The amulet would have carried on the mantle from the Living World Season 3, which added the first ever legendary accessory, Aurora. I sincerely hope that ArenaNet will add this at a later date, possibly in conjunction with the Living World Season 4 chapters, even though personally, I think those should be kind of separated, so that Path of Fire would have its own standalone genuinely big reward for players to strive for. Saying this out loud, I do personally remember feeling a bit stumped by the low requirement bar for the Aurora collection, but that was solely due to me already having acquired everything from all the different Living World maps prior to the introduction of Aurora at the very end of the season. So basically, I already had all the worst parts already, and so it felt a little easy for me since I was just rewarded retroactively. The same exact thing will happen for any Path of Fire amulet that will be added in the future, since I and a lot of other players are going to be in a similar situation. Last thing I want to touch on in this video is the general replayability incentive. Sure, there is already quite a bit of replayability spread throughout the maps, something that I already touched on briefly in my video about the Path of Fire desert maps, but I want to discuss the actual incentive to do so, because much in line with my earlier discussion about the lack of heavy grind in Path of Fire, the incentive for players to partake in excessive amounts of events are left solely to 2 factors as far as I see it. The first being the simple enjoyment of playing the events, which unfortunately doesn't get the majority of the player base to get things moving in this game. The second factor being the possibility of these new currencies, the trade contracts and the elegy mosaics, to be used in future rewards, such as the partial creation of the potential legendary amulet, which I talked about a second ago. It's really all up in the air as far as I see it, as to whether or not players will continuously feel like their time in the desert might be better spent elsewhere, which is a bit of a shame, especially since, in my opinion, ArenaNet have truly created great events and a really great event system with the bounty system. It does have its shortcomings though, and it's not perfect, but it does have the possibility of really becoming an amazing system. But first, the good parts. The bounty system offers players a chance to spawn their own minor world boss events. This can be done at any pace with almost any amount of players. Personally, I would recommend going with somewhere between 5 and 10 players that know what they're doing for the legendary bounties, as the scaling for these can seem quite crazy with a whole circa 50 people around. These bosses are fun, and they can be very different every time you do them, due to their inherent instability-esque system of adding additional random mechanics to the encounters, such as pulsing damage or the ability to heal themselves. I've already spent quite a bit of time doing full daily legendary bounty runs, and since you need approximately 900 elegy mosaics for the entire funerary weapon and armor collection, there's actually a good long road ahead to reach the end. But that's it. That's the end of the bounties. They're really only a means to an end for the funerary collections and a few achievements. There is no real monetary value beyond the elegy mosaics. They are, in my opinion, greatly undertuned in terms of their rewards, unless we consider the possibility of elegy mosaics being used in future content. But we have zero guarantee that that might happen. For all we know, we might just be seeing the addition of an entirely new season currency. And so once again, a great event system stands in the shadow of lacking incentive. Now, one of the inherent problems with adding additional incentives, however, is that just like I said that I've been doing, smaller groups of players might simply jump in front of a circle of players to complete these bounties. And so because of the immense respawn timers on some of the legendary bounties, a whole lot of players will unintentionally be locked out of completing those specific bounties for a good time. Imagine a scenario in which a group of players decide to go through the entire list of legendaries, which with a smaller group can be done extremely fast, and then just restarting afterwards to farm the currencies or rewards. Those players are going to lock out all the people on those maps that either can't keep up or are just spending much longer on a separate boss. Now, this won't be done with any evil intent necessarily, but the players left behind and locked out will easily feel very frustrated. I personally had something similar happen to me the first time I decided to group up a circle of players to do all the bounties. One guy just randomly got mad at the way I was doing things and so decided to jump ahead and activate bounties only to have their timers run out. This in turn forced my group of 30 plus players to simply switch maps to be able to continue because of just this one guy. All in all, in regards to the rewards and reward structures in general that came with Path of Fire, I have to say that I feel kinda weird. It genuinely feels to me like some rewards or bonuses should have been there and might already have been made, who knows, and allocated internally by the devs for the appropriate events, bosses, and possibly even achievements, but that they, for whatever reason, chose to not introduce these, just yet at least. One of the main reasons why I felt this is that comparatively to Heart of Thorns, which came with a whole slew of different materials such as crystalline ore and tokens like the provisioner tokens that were intended to be used for future legendary content, Path of Fire seemingly has done none of this, not even a hint at this. Heart of Thorns had me grinding events for months on end, just at the prospect of the future legendaries we were promised. I was buzzing about getting more and more crystalline ore and stacking up my provisioner's tokens. If you would have asked me prior to Path of Fire launch whether I believed we would be seeing a new income source for stuff like crystalline ore and amalgamated gemstones, my answer would have been a solid 100% yes. But it turned out that we got none of that. I guess perhaps their attitude towards these specific things I just mentioned is that they want to keep Heart of Thorns areas alive and well into the future, but come on. These were obvious rewards to easily get players excited. Instead we have, well, not a whole lot. Every meta event boss feels like just another event. There's no extra token to gather or material, not even a Guildhall statue token for bosses like the Pinata Choya or whatever. Everything is rewarded equally, which doesn't feel to me like an oversight. It feels to me like a deliberate withholding of said rewards. These rewards would then only be introduced at a later date whenever these are actually used in anything. That way all players are equal in the hunt for the new shinies. That wouldn't be the first time we'd seen something like that happen. But an attitude like that also works to counteract much of the learned behavior that a lot of veteran players have from this game. And so in the grand scheme of all things considered, Path of Fire in the long term feels like it has no end goal. As a side note, one of the most obvious examples of this withholding of rewards that I can give you is the immensely lacking incentive to even do map completion on the new maps. Sure, one of the collection items for the elite specialization weapons is gained through map completion, but other than that, we only see the standard stuff. The core game had the gift of exploration for the legendary weapons, and Heart of Thorns had all of the gifts for its legendaries. But Path of Fire, well, Path of Fire has nothing of the sort. But I'm willing to bet my money on legendary gifts being added to those later on. So much so that I even started up a spreadsheet to keep track of which of my characters had completed which map, so that if gifts were added, I would already be eligible for the maximum amount of fully combined gifts with the minimum required map completions for the collections. And before you comment, yes, I am fully aware that I may be a little bit crazy on that point. It's either that or the reward system has just been refined down to its simplest state of unambiguity, which, well, feels kinda bland overall. Like I said, it just feels weird to me. And on that note, I believe I have rounded up my thoughts on the matter. In the next video, I'll be talking about the elite specializations, so be sure to come back for that one. But for now, thank you all for watching. Until next time, I'll see you in the mists.